Hajj, the pillar of Hajj is the fifth pillar, and I think it's really wonderful to me that of all the pillars of Islam, even though all of these pillars are based on ability, zakat, if you're not able to pay it, you don't pay it. Fasting, if you're not able to fast, you don't fast. Even the prayer, if you're not able to pray standing, you pray reclining. If you're not able to pray reclining, you pray just with your eyes. If you're not able to do that, you pray in your consciousness. If you're not able to do that, you don't have to pray. But yet, the Hajj is the only one in the Quran where it says, لِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حَجُّ الْبَيْتِ لِمَنْ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. Allah, it is incumbent upon mankind or humankind the pilgrimage to His house for whoever is able to make the journey. Even though all the other ones it's the same stipulation, but in that one, the stipulation is mentioned. And I think part of that is because the vast majority of Muslims will never be able to make the Hajj. And so it's kind of like just the fact that it was mentioned in there, that there's kind of an ease with that. And this is why the example that you made about people fasting, even though they don't have to, they'll still do it. Really. Whereas the Hajj, there is definitely a limitation there related to wealth, physical capacity, borders, even now. For some people they can't. Like for a long time, the Russian Muslims could not make pilgrimage. The communist government would not let them make pilgrimage. So there's limitations, and yet right there in the Quran it says, for whoever's able to do it. The vast majority of Muslims will never do that. If you look, there's about 1 billion estimated Muslims. Every year, the maximum I could imagine pilgrimage being is maybe 4 million people. Right now it reaches about 3 million. And you are packed. You're like this, doing some of the rites. There's so many people. And it's very interesting. I've made pilgrimage 3 times, and I've made Umrah several times. But the actual pilgrimage, first thing, it's related to the ritual of Abraham. The Muslims believe that Abraham took his son Ishmael to the valley of Becca or Mecca. It's also called Becca in the Quran, Mecca and Becca. And he was commanded to leave his maidservant Hajar and Ishmael in that place. It's a barren place. And then he left them. There's what the tradition says is that Hajar, who was she was an African woman who was the mother of Ishmael, that she went into a state of anxiety about the place because there was no water, nothing. And she began to run between these 2 hills, Safa and Marwa. And she did that 7 times, worrying about her baby. And on the 7th time, the well of Zamzam emerged. And there's a well there that still to this day feeds the pilgrims of Mecca. And she drank from the well, and then some people there who were passing through helped them, and they become established. And Abraham comes back when Ishmael is becoming a man and builds with him the house in Mecca. This is what the tradition says. Builds with him the Kaaba. Now some say that the Kaaba was first built by Adam, alayhi salam. And some say that Adam and Hawa met on the plain of Arafah, which is, the word Arafah means to recognize. And it's where they recognize each other after the garden on the earth. Allah Ta'ala, Allah knows best about those things. But the basic idea is that the Kaaba was the first house established for the worship of one God only. And Ibrahim built the house, and it's a cube, very simple structure. Nothing there. And then the rites that are related to it is you enter into a ritual state which is called ihram. For a woman, it's taking a bath and dressing in her normal dress. Women tend to wear white on the Hajj. They don't have to, but they tend to, just as a tradition. The man enters into what's called ihram, which is 2 pieces of cloth, a loin cloth, and then a cloth over him. It can have no stitching. It's woven, but it cannot have stitching by hand. Because you're supposed to completely, it's like, it represents complete impoverishment before God. And everybody has to be the same. And so it's encouraged that everybody looks the same. The rich man, the poor man, the free man, the bondsman, everybody, the king, the pauper, everybody becomes the same. And that's the idea, that humanity before God is equal. There's absolutely no differences. And so even in clothes, a rich man, you cannot wear rings. You cannot wear any display of worldly wealth. So somebody who normally wears jewelry, they have to take it all off. So you wouldn't know, you see a person, you don't know if they're rich, they're poor, you don't have a clue. They just look the same as you do. And so the idea is literally that humanity completely strips themselves of any of their social accruement, social status. And they go there before God equal. And the first ritual is you enter into the place of Mecca, and you go to the house, and you do a circumambulation 7 times. You go around the house 7 times, which according to the tradition is what Ibrahim did, and then the Prophet ﷺ purified and renewed it again. So after going around the house, you will kiss the black stone. The black stone is a stone that's been identified as a meteorite, but traditionally it was believed that it came from heaven, and originally it was white and became black from the wrong actions of people that touched it. And you go and you kiss the stone, and the Prophet said the stone is it's like the right hand of God on the earth. In other words, it's symbolic, like you go and kiss the hand of the king or the Pope. For the Catholics, they would kiss the ring. That there you go and you kiss the stone as a symbol of being invited to the house of the king. And you kiss the stone, and then you pray 2 rakats or 2 prostrations at the place of Ibrahim. It's called Maqamu Ibrahim, where Abraham built the house. And there is an actual place, a maqam, and there are 2 footprints in there that are traditionally considered to be the footprints of Abraham. And then at that point you go, you drink from the well of Zamzam, and you make prayer. It's a good place to make prayer. And then you go to Safa and Marwa, and you go between them 7 times. And there's a period where you actually do a quick run. It's not a sprint, but like a jog, which symbolizes Hajjers running through that area. And then after the 7th time you've completed that, you go to Mina. And Mina is a place where you prepare for Arafat. So you clean yourself again, and then the next morning you set out for Arafat. You will spend the day at Arafat. It's a plain that is considered to be a preparation for the Day of Judgment. You're literally preparing for the day when all of humanity is before God in a nonlinear sense, no front, back, right? It's not anthropomorphic, but is before God and goes naked, stripped of all of their worldly distinctions, and you ask for forgiveness. And so the prayer of Arafat is to ask forgiveness of God, to come. It's very powerful because you are literally seeing humanity there. I mean, I've been to the Vatican at times when there's a lot of people. I haven't been to any of these Hindu gatherings, but I've never seen anything like it in the sense that literally there are Chinese people, there are Indonesians, there are Malay people, there are African people, there are black Africans, there are white Africans, there are Turkic people, there are European people, now there are American people, there are Mongolians, there are Chinese from different places in China, there are Cambodians, there are Thai people, Vietnamese people, Filipino people. People literally coming. It says in the Quran they will come from every deep crevice. They will come from every valley, and they will come to this place, and they're all there. You just see the whole thing. You see sick people, you see healthy people, you see people crawling, you see people being carried. Some people literally carry other people on their backs. You see people carrying their parents. So it's just a very, very overwhelming experience to enter into that sacred space. And the great reminder on that day, the verse that was quoted when the Prophet made Hajj, there was a black man who gave the adhan. And the Arabs looked down on, they had this racism, and they looked down on it, and they said, they asked why that man was giving the call to prayer. And so the verse came down that we have created you in peoples and tribes to know one another. So the idea is people come there really to learn. It's a little difficult. I'm kind of getting back into that today, so just excuse me for a second. Hajj, for some reason, I just have a hard time talking about, because I've been there, and I've had the experience, and they start coming back to me, that experience in that place. But so I'll just try to get over this. The verse just said that, we have created you in peoples and tribes to know one another. And it says the noblest in the eyes of God are the most conscientious. In other words, the one thing that the Prophet said on the Hajj pilgrimage was, there is no preference over a white man or a black man, or a black man over a white man. So the idea is just to eliminate this insidious aspect of human nature, which is the idea that some people are superior to others. And when you see everybody in that same condition, the nomad and the sedentary, the rich and the poor, and they're all just there in that same basic human condition, that we are bereft and we are poor before God. It's very powerful as a reminder, that beware of considering yourself above this person next to you because of something incidental like color, or because of something like wealth, or because of something like beauty, or because of something like lineage. That in that place, all of those things disappear, and you're just like everybody else. You are a naked creature that has to eat, sleep, and defecate, and urinate, and menstruate, and procreate, and do all these things. And there's something very basic and fundamental to your humanity. So the Hajj really does. And what I've noticed with people who make the Hajj is there is often a very powerful transformation that occurs in their life. It really is a very transformative experience. You are not the same person. You don't look at other people the same way, and there's just a transformation. And traditionally they said if a person comes back worse from Hajj, bad sign. They said either he went there with the wrong intention, or it wasn't accepted for whatever reason. So the idea is that Hajj is really a time when you complete it, that it's your life's journey, and you're ready to die. And that really is a kind of completion. So those are the 5 pillars, and that's a very quick and general overview. So what time is it now?
Quarter after.
Oh, it's 12:15? So I went over. We started late. Now you can't do that when there's bells and things, right? So any quick questions?
How long is
The Hajj only lasts for 4 days. Yeah, and it's actually 3, and then there's the last.
Can you explain the part of the Hajj where they throw stones?
Good, yeah, I forgot about that. There is a point where, according to Abraham, the tradition, Abraham was like tempted by Satan or Shaitan, and he cast stones. And the idea, the Muslims believe in an entity called Iblis, which is where we get Diablos, or Shaitan. And Shaitan in Arabic is from Shaitana, which means to take people away from or to distance people. And the idea is that there is an entity whose role and function is to attempt to distance people from God, to separate them from God. And there are 2 types of shayateen. There are human ones, and there are ones that are in the unseen realm. The human ones, according to the Prophet, are worse. Right? Human, like warmongers, people like that. People that they thrive off creating. There's actually people that will want to create wars between other people. It's kind of hard to imagine, but there's people that make a lot of money doing things like that, and they derive a lot of benefit. So, and it's also, I really consider in a lot of ways, there's a lot of people with, I read this thing called Ad Week, which is really, I would really recommend if you're teaching any social studies or sociology type courses, to get your students to read that magazine. Because I think it really wakes them up to the idea of manipulation within their culture. The fact that there are people manipulating them at very serious and psychological levels. And Ad Week is a magazine that it's very hard to find in your average store. You can get it at very good places where they have almost all the magazines And it's a magazine designed for people who are advertisers. It's not a consumer magazine, it's designed for people. And the interesting thing about the magazine is that the commodity being sold is human beings. That's what's so fascinating. When they put the ads out, what they're trying to sell you is an audience. And they'll guarantee you a certain percentage of sales from that audience. And they really bring really interesting things. Like they had one where last month's ad week, where and I'm interested just because I'm very interested in media and I'm interested in education. I really think that the media has been very effective at educating people in a certain way. But they had one that said that the recent study that they did, the psychologists showed that American men, that their number one sexual fantasy was with nurses. And what they said was that this was very useful for advertisers because they could have like a beer commercial where a nurse comes in with a beer and the man's in the bed and they don't have to do anything overt. But for that group out there that happens to think that would be an interesting thing to explore, there would be a type of what they call anchoring in the subconscious, right? And so there's a sexual stimulation related to that type of beer. And this is the type of thing, I mean, they really do this stuff, this type of research. And I think to just empower young people, to let them know that really that there are forces out there that do try to manipulate them for their own good, and to kind of become aware of that so that they're not such victims, that they kind of get a type of critical analysis. Another really useful book was a PhD dissertation done, and I can't remember her name, but it's called Decoding Advertisements, which is a lot about, and it's not, there's some real crazy type about a lot of the real, subliminal type things that I think go a little too far. They start reading things in that just aren't there. But these are more done at they're academic. This is a very serious academic study of trying to understand really what's behind the whole ideology of advertisement. So, any other questions?
You finished. Oh, could you just tell when they
Oh, so what? Thank you. I got off. I'm a tangent. Go off on these tangents. What you do is you pick up these stones, 21 stones, and then you throw 7 stones at these 3 pillars. And it's a purely symbolic thing. And unfortunately, some of these hajis get a little out of hand and they start thinking that really is the devil, right? So you get some stones. And there was a hadith in which a man was throwing big stones and the Prophet said, beware of going to extremes in your religion. The Prophet actually hated extremism. He really did. He was very wary of extremes. He was a very balanced person. He said, my way is the middle way. He did not like people that were fasting all the time. He said, I eat and I fast. He did not like people who abstained from sexual relations. He said, I have sexual relations. He did not like people that stayed up all night. He said, I pray and I sleep. So he really was very wary. He saw one time there was a rope in the mosque tied to the wall, and he asked what it was, and he said, so-and-so put that for when they fell asleep, that it would keep them up. And he said, take it down and tell them not to do that. He saw another man who swore that he would stay in the sun until such and such happened, and he would fast. And the Prophet told him, said, tell him to get out of the sun, and just finish his fast for the day, but not to go into the sun. So he was very against extremes. And so you're supposed to pick up very small pebbles and literally just throw them like this. It's not supposed to be like, whoosh, So people take sandals and throw. I mean, it gets a little crazy. The throwing is actually probably the hardest part of Hajj because people do get a little out of control. And then you're dealing with a lot of, unfortunately from the Muslim world, you're getting a lot of people coming out of very ignorant backgrounds. A lot of them don't know their tradition. They haven't learned the rules of Hajj. So you have a lot of things. But it's amazing, given the amount of people, given the space, given the intensity, there are very, very rarely any incidents of, I have never heard of any outright violent incidences where people actually, other than I think there were some riots that the Iranians during the whole Iranian Revolution did. But my 3 times on the Hajj, if somebody starts getting angry, there's all these people around them just tell them, be patient, you're on Hajj, and they remind them and things like that. And people respond to that. And the same is true in Ramadan. You're fasting, just relax and calm down.
Can you explain that feast at the end?
It symbolizes that Abraham, alayhi salam, that when he was told to kill his son, what the Jewish tradition calls the Aqidah tradition, that it was replaced with a ram. And there's a difference of opinion in the Muslim tradition whether it was Isaac or Ishmael. I think most Muslims now believe that it was Ishmael, but early on the Prophet never said which child it was, and it's not really considered important it's not essential to the story. The importance is the act of submission. And what you do is you celebrate by sacrificing a ram preferably, or some other animal, and then distribute that meat to poor people and things like that. And other Muslims take part in that around the world. Even though the Hajjis are doing it, other Muslims, like in Santa Clara, people will go out and they will sacrifice on that day. Many people, and it's encouraged to do that. Any other? So I think that ends the session on Islam, and I hope that was beneficial, and thanks for your attention.